Welcome to another edition of the Speaking of Speaking podcast. It's time to cash flow what you know. And I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins. So, speaking of speaking, today we're going to be talking about going from employee to entrepreneur. And for me, going from trial lawyer to professional speaker. So, I'm going to share some of the background of how I got there, but I'm also going to give you 8 steps that you can use. So if you're thinking about transitioning, if you're a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, HR professional, somebody who has a deep level of expertise, and right now what you are doing is using that expertise to do the work. And instead, you want to be paid for what you know, the knowing, not the doing. That's what we're going to be talking about here today. And this came to me, this whole idea about cash flowing what you know came to me while I was practicing law. So when I was practicing, like towards the end of my practice around 2017, so I retired in 2019, the end of 2019. But in 2017, I was practicing, and part of my practice involved personal injury cases. And in those personal injury cases, I would take depositions of expert witnesses. And I remember being at an expert witness deposition one day, and it was in this beautiful building in downtown Tampa, looking out on, the windows were like looking out on the city. And the person that I was taking the deposition of was the doctor for the expert doctor for the plaintiff. Now, this is a medical doctor. And what he had done was reviewed the plaintiff's medical records and then come up with his opinion about what he thought as it related to the injuries and the causation, all that kind of stuff. And one of the ways that when we're cross-examining witnesses on the witness stand, and the way that we impeach them, especially expert witnesses, is basically to paint them as a gun for hire, a hired gun, however you want to call it. Did I just say that wrong? I don't know. A hired gun, right? As a hired gun. Anyway, and the way that we do that is to ask them how much money they have been paid over time for giving this testimony. So, this particular doctor, I was asking him, I knew that he was being paid thousands for the particular case because that's how much we pay experts. And over time, I asked him, I think it was like maybe 3 or 4 years, how much he had made in that time period. And he said, I think he said it was like 3 million. It was millions, not 1 million, it was multiple millions. And when I tell you, I was like, oh, girl, you are in the wrong business. Like, what are you doing? Here it is. Like, you are in, like, this is like, let's say 2017. I had been practicing law for over 2 decades by that point, and I am being billed out by the insurance company at like 100 and something dollars an hour. And on my employment cases, maybe 300 and something dollars an hour. I'm making multiple 6 figures as an attorney. However, my billable hours, right? And I got to do a lot of work to get that money. So I started thinking and I was like, wow. I was like, this man is getting paid for what he knew, not what he do. And all they do, let me tell you, they do not meet the plaintiff. They've never met them. They've never talked to them. They've never examined them. All they're doing is we send them documents. They review the documents, and based on what they know, based on the brilliance that they have in their head, the experience, the professional experience, day-to-day experience, all of that, they use that and then become expert witnesses so that they can get paid for what they know. So that started me, really started me thinking, because I had been thinking about retiring from the practice of law. Went to another deposition, same thing happened. I was like, girl, you got to do something about this. So when that became very clear to me that I could really get paid for what was in my brain, really get paid for the expertise, the skills that I had developed as a trial lawyer for over 2 decades, as an arbitrator, as a mediator, as all the things, right? As an educator, I was like, we need to get this together. But can't do all that without a plan, right? I can't just leave my what I always call my good check as a practicing attorney to just jump into the world of entrepreneurship. And it wouldn't have been the first time that I got into entrepreneurship. Years before, I used to own a wedding and event planning business, so I was an entrepreneur. But even at that time, I didn't really understand the world of entrepreneurship. So I knew that if I was going to leave my profession, so go from employee to entrepreneur, from lawyer to professional speaker, that I had to have a plan. This is something that I had to really work at and I needed to do. So I decided to make my plan. So I the end around the end of 2017, when everybody's making their New Year's resolutions, my resolutions were a lot of things, but the three that are relevant to what we're talking about is one, I decided that I wanted to write my first book. Two, I wanted to become a professional speaker. And three, I wanted to do a TEDx. And let me just say this for a second, the difference between when I say a professional speaker and a public speaker. I'll talk about public speaking on this podcast, but when I'm talking about you as a profession, I'm talking about a professional speaker, not a public speaker. And I make the difference in that when you think of yourself as a professional speaker as opposed to a public speaker, then you'll focus more on getting paid, right? Because if you're a professional, you get paid. So that's just the distinction. So anyway, I made this list that I wanted to do these three things. But how am I going to go about doing this? And I'm practicing law at the same time. I am not just practicing law looking at documents. I'm a trial lawyer. I had been a trial lawyer ever since I started practicing law in 1995. Which means I'm in depositions, I'm in court, I'm traveling, I'm trying cases that are going for multiple days at a time and for hours throughout the day, right? So when you're in trial, just as a side note, when I'm in trial, I'm talking about 14 to 18-hour days trying the case and then coming back to the war room and figuring out what we need to do next and all the stuff that we do to prepare for the trial before it is a whole mission. It's a whole mission that really prepared me for this, right? Um, and so I had to figure out how I was going to do that and manage my day and manage my life. And so I looked at those three things to think about, okay, how can I get this done? And what I'm going to do is show you in these 8 steps, like how I got that done, so that for those of you who are thinking about transitioning right out of your profession, I always call it like leveraging. I was leveraging my profession to pursue my purpose, right? So really transitioning out of the role of the doing into the role of now getting paid for the knowing. I'm going to give you 8 steps that you can follow to be able to do that. Do not listen to these people who are like, yeah, child, just quit your day job and don't do that. Do not do that. You have got to have a plan. And so I'm going to give you the 8 steps to show you how I did it. All right. So got my little trusty notes here to keep me on track. So I will, so let's go through this step. So this is from idea to execution. So I told you that I got the idea from being in those depositions and watching those witnesses. So now I have this idea. Now what do I do about it? How do I execute on that idea? So the first thing, step number one, is to create the vision. So that's what I did, right? At the end of 2017, I created the vision. What was the vision for how I was going to transition out of the full-time practice of law into full-time entrepreneurship? Well, what I wanted to do for the profession part of it was to be a professional speaker. But I also understood that I needed to not just jump out and say I was going to be a speaker. I needed to do more, right? So I created the vision. So the vision is step one. Step one is I looked at, okay, I want to write a book. I want to do my first TEDx. Really, probably going to be my only TEDx at this point because I don't feel like doing another one. But I wanted to write a book. I wanted to become a professional speaker and I wanted to do a TEDx. No particular order. I just knew that those were the things, right? So step one, create the vision. Step two, we got to design the plan. So a lot of times what happens is we have a desire to do something and then we don't execute because we don't have a plan. So when you come up with the vision, that's just the first part of it, right? So you think about when you go to vision board parties, all that kind of stuff, but you put these things on the board and that's great. That's the vision. How are you going to get them? How are you going to get there? And I know people talk about manifesting, but manifesting actually takes work. So we're going to talk about the work that needs to be done. So what did I do? I decided now, okay, this is the vision. So how am I going to get to execution? I need to develop the plan, right? So step two, develop the plan. So I looked at the three things that I wanted to do: the book, speaking, and also the TEDx. Well, I had never written a book before, so I had to learn how to do that. But I knew that, I was capable. So I started looking at what I already had in my toolbox around which book I could write first. Quick tip: if you have been speaking and doing presentations and it's a presentation that you've been doing all the time, or it's something that you have been doing in your work for a long time, start there. My first book was called Ace Your Workplace Investigations, and I decided to write that because I was always doing training on investigations, and I already had the PowerPoint presentation. So the PowerPoint presentation just became the outline for the book. Number two, when it came to professional speaking, I was already a speaker. I had already been speaking. I had already been training. I had already been doing all that. I just needed somebody to pay me outside of my salary to be able to do that, right? So that had to become part of the plan. How do I find out how to get paid for that? And then third, I'd never done a TEDx. Don't even know why that ended up on my list. So again, I knew I had to go figure it out. But okay, so now we have this plan, right? I know what the thing I want to do. I have a plan. I need to go find, right? I need to go find the things, the people that can help me. So step three is research. I know exactly what I want to do. I already have some stuff in place. I know that I have the skill sets, right? So for TEDx, I already knew I was a speaker. So I already have the skill sets. But what do I need more than that to go into make this a reality? And so step three is to do the research. And what are you researching? You're researching expertise, resources, and relationships. What I mean by researching expertise is, what other skills do you need? Do you need to learn something else? Do you need to develop some type of skill set in order to be able to do it? So, did I need to develop skill sets in order to write this book? Well, I knew how to write because I write all day. I was writing all day as a trial lawyer. I knew how to communicate my thoughts, but I didn't really know how to write a book. So, I had to go research, like, how do you write a book? What are the pieces of a book? I had to learn about the front matter and the back matter and the acknowledgments and the dedication and where does it go and how do you put it together and how do you format a book and how do you get the book cover? All the things. I had to do the research to understand how this vision of becoming an author was going to come into fruition. What did I need to do? What did I need to learn? So I had to learn those things. So those are areas of expertise that I had to develop. Then I had to look at, what are the resources? What resources do I need? Well, I needed obviously a computer and all of that software, different software, and I had all of those things already. So what are the resources that I needed? So that was just for the book I was saying to you. For speaking, what I need to for expertise, I didn't really need to get any more expertise around actual speaking. What I did need to get more expertise around is the business of speaking, right? So I knew how to do the thing. I knew how to be the talent, right, in the speaking business. What I didn't understand, I didn't know, is the business of speaking. So I had to do research to figure out, how do I learn the business of speaking? That is a skill set that I needed to learn. TEDx, I needed to understand what expertise other than being a lawyer and being a speaker already, what did I need? So, what resources did I need? Resources, again, I had to figure out what is out there that can facilitate me being and doing all of these things. So, you're looking at resources. So, when I'm talking about resources, I'm talking about things, right? I'm talking about, do you need software? Do you need money? Do you need a building? Do you need equipment? What do you need to be able to do that? So, as far as a speaker, I needed, a computer. I didn't have a mic and all the and a webcam. I didn't have all that stuff when I was a lawyer. I didn't need it. I wasn't on camera like that, right? I was in court in person, and my computer was at work, right? So You got to think about what are the resources that you need to be able to do the thing, and then what are the relationships that you need to build. Who do you need? And for me, I needed coaches to talk to me about the speaking business. I joined an association to learn about the speaking business. I had to hire when I was editing the book, right? I had to learn about book editing and all the different types of editing and what type of editor I needed. I needed to find somebody who could format the book. I needed to find somebody who could um, design the cover of the book for my speaking. I needed to find people who could connect me or who could talk to me about where to find these speaking engagements, these paid speaking engagements for TEDx. I needed to find somebody to help me figure out how to get on the TEDx stage because I know how to do that. Not only did I, and what I learned by getting the right person, so I hired a coach, was that I needed somebody to teach me how to speak like a TEDx speaker, right? I already knew how to speak as a lawyer and as a trainer, but doing a TEDx is a whole different ballgame. And so I had to figure out who are the people, right? The relationships that I need. So as you're thinking about this transition, step 3 is to do the research. Step 4 is to set deadlines. Make sure that there is a time associated with it. Now, when I was transitioning, I had hired a coach once, and so I'm telling you, this is like 2018, right? That I'm really starting now to do the work. And I hired a coach, and I told him, "Oh, I want to do it 2022." I said, "I want to just retire in 2022 and, go for it. That's when I'm going to do it." And he said, "2022." He was like, "That's 4 years from now." And I'm like, "Yeah, because I got to get all my stuff together." He was like, "Do you know how much life will happen in 4 years?" He was like, "Okay, I'll give you 2020." I was like, "Okay, 2020." So the idea was for me to, do all the planning, do everything that I needed to do all my research, start, doing the work. And I was going to retire in 2020. Well, that didn't happen because I got fired in October of 2019. And I got fired not because of my performance, not because I was a bad lawyer. They said they couldn't afford to pay me anymore. But the truth is, what had happened was that because I had this plan and because I had done this research and I knew the things that I had to do, one of the things that I learned is that I had to brand myself. And so I started building my brand. Now I'd known about branding because I had done it when I had my wedding and event planning business, but I started to brand myself as a speaker, as an expert, as a thought leader. And it rubbed my boss the wrong way. They did not like it. So they went on a campaign to get me out of there. So I know this is kind of a sidebar, but I want to throw this in here. So they went on a campaign to get me out of there. And the reason I want to share that with you is because I want you to know that especially for those of you who are still in the corporate space, when you start to do the things that are going to take you out of that space and people realize it, it's going to piss them off. It is going to piss them off. They are not going to be happy about it. And they're going to do things to try to stall you, to try to get you to stop, to try to jeopardize what it is that you want to do. Do not let that happen. You got to figure out ways. One of the things that I had to do was to block all of them on my social media, right? So that they couldn't see what I was up to. And I had to be very careful and discerning about who I talked to about what it is that I was doing because it's a basically small town, right? If you think about Tampa, it's like kind of a small town in the legal sense. In the legal industry, everybody knows everybody. They knew who, my boss was. People knew him. And so I had to be very careful about that. But then they went on this mission for the next several months to kind of push me out. And I had a conversation one time they had called me into HR, and and he said, "Hey, Kelly, they were talking to me about my billable hours, but one of the things that they had started to do was to reduce the work they were giving to me so that my billable hours would be reduced so they could complain about it, child. It's a whole thing." And we had a conversation, and he said, "Kelly, he started talking to me about my billable hours." I said, "Stop, stop, stop. Mm-mm. Let's stop right there." I said, "Let's be real about this." I was like, "I'm leaving. right? You know I'm leaving. I know I'm leaving. It's just who's going to do it first. Either they were going to put me out of there or I was going to leave first. So that was the landscape in which I was operating. But I was still doing my work. I was still operating in excellence, but I was still moving on the path to make sure that the idea that I had come up with was going to be executed on. So I know that was a little outside of like the deadlines, but the reason I brought it up is because your deadlines will cause you to do the things and cause you to not be like, oh, I'll put it off till tomorrow. I'll put it off till tomorrow. Luckily, right, my coach was like, not 2022, because if I had put it off till 2022, I'd have been like, oh, I got time, right? If I had kept stuck with that. In 2020 was the time I said, oh, okay, we were already in 2018. It wasn't too far off. Luckily, I did that. Luckily, I had deadlines. The other deadline I had is that within 2018, I wanted to have accomplished those three things: write a book, get paid as a professional speaker, and do my TEDx, right? And November is when the TEDx, and I'll talk to you in another episode about my TEDx and give you all of that. But the TEDx was November of 2018. I was going to be speaking at a huge conference in Atlanta in front of HR people. Of course, the book would be perfect for them in August. And the host of the conference said that he would give me a table and I could launch my book and all, I could have a book signing and all the things. So I had August, right? So now let me just give you the timeline, because obviously it's like December I start to write this list, right? Now we get to January, February, and I'm really, really thinking about it. So February, I join an association so I can learn about the business of speaking. Um, I start writing the book because now the book has to be written, edited, formatted, designed, published, and ready to go by this thing in August. And now I have to do this TEDx, which is going to be in November, right? So we found out in July that I'd be doing this TEDx in November. And so again, having all of those deadlines made me do the work. This is why it's so important for you to have deadlines. So, number 4 is to set deadlines so that it causes you to be working towards something, and towards something not just in a airy fairy indefinite type of, oh, I'm going to do this at some point, but actually on a specific deadline. Number 5. Number 5 is relates to number 3. And number 5 is now you got to invest. So you've done the research, you know what expertise you need, what resources you need, what relationships you need. Now you got to invest in it. You have got to invest in it. And the investment is both time and money. Time and money. My first coach was not inexpensive, right? I had her for 3 months. I spoke to her, I think, twice a month by phone. And I promise you, it was high 4 figures. It was high 4 figures, right? For me to do that. But it was really important for me to have her because she was doing what it is that I had a vision of doing. She had been doing it for years. She was being paid the amount of money for her talks that I wanted to be paid for mine. And so that's the person that I sought out. And how did I get to her? Through other relationships, right? Telling people what it is that I wanted, and somebody introduced me to her. But you've got to invest. One of the things that I find so fascinating about this business and people who want to come into the speaking business is that you want somebody to pay you. You want somebody to pay you, but you do not want to pay first. You do not want to invest. You want to get everything for free. Listen, you're going to get a lot of free stuff in this podcast when you join the newsletter, right? The Speaking of Speaking newsletter, which is at sosnewsletter.com. You'll get a lot of free stuff. That's not going to do it for you, right? You can try to piece it together and watch all the videos and try to piece everything that I tell you together, but that's not going to work. I knew, listen, I'm brilliant, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I am brilliant. But I knew that I had to get somebody to help me to piece the things together, right? To make sure that I was on the right track, to save me time, to save me money, to save me the mistakes. So you're going to have to invest Once you figure out what's the expertise, resources, and relationships, you're going to have to invest in that. So step 5 is all about investing. You're going to invest time, you're going to invest resources. I was telling you at the beginning that my days were long. As a trial lawyer, they were extraordinarily long. But you know what I had to do? I had to come home and work on this business. I had to come home and work on my branding. I had to come home and work on that book. I had to come home and work on that TEDx. My coach for my TEDx was in Japan. So that was some very late nights, but I was committed. I had a desire and I was committed to doing it, and I believed that I could do it, and I would take the action to do it, right? And part of that action is investing. All right. Step 6, execute. Execute on the plan. You got the plan, execute on the plan. Do the work. Do the work. Do the work. Do I need to say it again? Do the work. I did the work. I had the vision. I created the plan. I figured out what I needed. I did the research. I invested, right? I set the deadlines and I executed. And because I was diligent and disciplined about that and doing all of the things, by November, I had written the book, published the book, had a book signing, gotten my first paid, right? So outside of my salary, speaking engagement. It was $5,000, right? My very first speaking engagement as a professional speaker. And I had delivered my TEDx, which is now an award-winning TEDx. It won a Cicero speech writing award, only because the only way that I was able to do all of those things in the span of 11 months while still practicing law as a trial lawyer full time is because I went through these steps and I was disciplined and I did the work. So, step 6, execute, do the work. Step 7. So, step 7, what we have to do is then, after we do all the things, we got to go back and revisit and revise and, just look at, audit everything, analyze everything, see what worked, what didn't work, what can you do better next time, what don't you want to do next time, right? So you want to always be analyzing. One of the things that I have learned in entrepreneurship is there's always a pivot, there's always a shift. The pivot might be a full pivot, like like I'm just going to turn the other way, I'm going to go left, go right, I'm going to stop. It might just be a slight shift. It doesn't always have to be major, but you always need to be looking at what you're doing, right? When I was in the transition, I was always looking at what I was going to be doing. And one of the ways that I was able to analyze what was happening as I was executing, right? As I was doing the things is because I had my coach, right? When I was thinking about my book and the book titles and my company name and all the things, like she was always checking, like she was always talking to me about, like, why is that a good idea, why is that not a good idea, you need to think about this. So there's always this analysis that is going on about what is happening so that you make things better, so that you don't fall into traps, so that you don't just make mistakes, so that you don't make the mistakes over and over and over again. And sometimes it just makes sure that you shift, right? Because even though the vision we created, right, originally in the plan, we may still need to shift. We may learn that we need to do something different. We may learn that I really wanted to do that, but that's not what I want. No, that's not it. Because let me say this right here. The original vision was not that. The original vision was for me to come out of the practice of law and become an HR consultant, to be doing employee handbooks and audits, like, and giving advice to companies around employment and reviewing severance agreements and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to be like a mobile general counsel, an outside counsel, until I did the research and I laid out the plan. And when I laid out the plan, I was like, I don't want to do any of this shit. Right. And so analyzing is a very important part of the process because it helps you to move, to grow, and to really stand powerfully in the greatness of who you are, doing the things that you want to do, right? And bringing you joy. And then the last thing is to just repeat the process. Just keep doing it, right? As you go through, just keep doing it. But if you do these 8 steps, if you really, hone in on these 8 steps, and I'm going to go over them again, I will guarantee you that you will have a smoother transition than if you listen to some of these people who are like, yeah, just quit your day job. That ain't gonna work. Oh, and another thing I should have put in here, save. Save for the transition. Maybe I'll add that one. So let's say number 9, save. Save money for the transition. That's one thing that I wish I had done better, was to really set myself up. But remember, I was thinking that I would have until, I had said August of 2020 is when I was going to leave, but I ended up losing my job. I was told I was going to lose my job the end of December 2019. I was told in October, and my job ended December of 2019. So it took away a whole, 11 months of me, this planning that I was going to be doing. So again, you have to make sure that and understand that your timing is not always somebody else's timing. And so be mindful of that as you're setting your deadlines and really being prepared for this transition. And here's the great thing. You can do it. You got this. You have got this. It is doable, but it's doable when you have a real plan. So let me just run through the 8 steps again. And step 1 is to create the vision. Step 2 is to develop your plan. Step 3 is to do the research. Step 4 is to set deadlines. Step 5 is to invest. Step 6 is to execute on the plan. Step 7 is to analyze. Step 8 is to repeat. And we just added step 9 is to save. So I cannot wait for you all to really start working on this and working on your transition, and just knowing that there are people out here who are rooting for you. There are people like me who work with people like you, right? Who work with, really, I work with women to help you to make this transition the right way. And when I say that, I'm talking about your positioning, which is something we'll talk about in a different episode. But just know that you can ask me questions. Make sure that you subscribe to the newsletter, sosnewsletter.com, and you can ask me questions through the newsletter. I would love to see your comments under this video. Please share this, right? Do me a favor, help me help somebody else, help me help another sister, um, or another brother, hey, whatever. Help me help somebody else who is on this journey of understanding how to cash flow what you know. Share this with your network, share it with 3 people, 5 people, share, subscribe, like, comment, and make sure that you subscribe to the newsletter, because in the newsletter, I'll also be giving you other, like, behind the scenes stuff of what I'm doing. I do a weekly insight and just other, all kinds of goodies and gems will be dropped in there too. So I hope this episode was valuable for you. I want to make sure that you are able to cash flow what you know, but to do it in a way that is intentional and in a way that is strategic. So let me know. Let me know when you're going to make the leap and what step you're on. What you doing? What you doing out there? All right, y'all. Until next time, take care. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check the show notes for any links or resources from this episode. If you enjoyed it, leave a review, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss an update. Also, follow me on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter for more behind the scenes content. Stay tuned for our next episode.